They say you never see the first strike coming. And for me, it was the perfect storm of trust and ignorance. Emily and I had been married for 5 years when I first noticed the cracks. We were the picture of stability, or so I thought. I was the hard-working husband, pulling late hours at the law firm, while she was the social butterfly, fluttering through her days with the ease of someone who had few concerns about money or loyalty. The first time I caught her was at her office party. I had dropped by as a surprise, only to find her locked in an intimate moment with her coworker, a man I had shaken hands with just weeks before. It was humiliating, but Emily convinced me to stay. Tears, promises, and counseling sessions followed. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to rebuild. It felt foolish. Yet the love I had for her outweighed the bitter taste of betrayal. For months after, we walked on eggshells around each other, trying to restore what was broken. Emily became more attentive, offering the kind of affection I hadn't realized I'd missed until she started giving it again. Date nights, weekend getaways, whispered assurances. She pulled out all the stops. I wanted to believe this was a genuine effort, but deep down, a voice whispered that it was a performance, one choreographed to erase her guilt and pacify my doubts. Meanwhile, I found myself hyper-aware of her actions. Every late phone call, every unexplained outing, it all felt like another puzzle piece in a sinister game. I hated that part of myself. I didn't want to be suspicious, but the foundation of trust we'd built was now riddled with cracks, each one threatening to shatter under the weight of her past transgressions. By the end of the first year post-betrayal, things felt stable, at least on the surface. Emily had returned to her old routines: morning yoga, lunches with her girlfriends, and evening charity events. I had convinced myself that we had turned a corner, but every now and then, something would tug at the edge of my awareness. A late meeting here, a forgotten detail there. It was small, almost insignificant, but enough to reignite the doubts I thought I had buried. One evening, she came home later than usual, her hair slightly tousled and her perfume faintly different. When I asked about it, she laughed, brushing off my question with the ease of someone who had perfected the art of evasion. "You're being silly," she said, her smile so genuine it almost silenced the alarm bells ringing in my mind. Almost. I wasn't looking for proof when I found it. It was a simple mistake. A second phone left charging on the kitchen counter while Emily showered. The screen lit up with a message, a name I didn't recognize, and a preview that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make up for last time." My hands trembled as I unlocked the phone using her usual passcode, the one she hadn't bothered to change. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Photos, messages, videos, an entire archive documenting a second life I hadn't known existed. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was thriving in her deceit, weaving a web of lies so intricate that it left me breathless. When I confronted her, I expected tears, apologies, maybe even a confession. What I got was something else entirely. She didn't deny it, not exactly. Instead, she turned the blame on me. My long hours, my emotional distance, my supposed neglect, it was all laid at my feet as the reason for her actions. "I felt invisible," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You were married to your work, not me." Her words cut deep, but they didn't absolve her. The weight of her betrayal was too heavy for excuses to carry, no matter how eloquently she framed them. Yet, despite everything, she begged for another chance. She swore she could change, that she wanted to fix what we had. Against all logic, I hesitated. Perhaps it was weakness, or maybe it was hope, but I agreed to try again. We started from scratch, or so I told myself. Emily seemed earnest this time, her efforts to rebuild our marriage almost overcompensating for what she had done. I wanted to believe in her, to believe that people could change, that forgiveness could lead to redemption. But as the weeks turned into months, the wounds of her betrayal lingered, refusing to heal. The truth was I didn't trust her. Every time her phone buzzed, my stomach knotted. Every time she smiled too brightly or spoke too vaguely about her day, I felt the sting of doubt. I didn't want to live like this, but I also didn't want to give up on the life we had built together. It was a limbo of my own making, and it was slowly tearing me apart. It came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Emily had gone to the store, leaving her laptop open on the dining table. I wasn't snooping, not at first, but when a notification popped up, my curiosity got the better of me. What I found confirmed what I had feared all along. She was still seeing him. The messages were explicit, shameless, and filled with plans for a future that didn't include me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The love I had clung to, the hope that had kept me tethered to her, it all disintegrated, leaving only anger in its wake. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I planned. If Emily had taught me anything, it was how to be methodical. Over the next few weeks, I documented everything. The messages, the late-night outings, the money she had siphoned from our joint account to fund her secret life. I gathered it all, a damning arsenal of evidence that I would wield when the time was right. But revenge wasn't enough. I needed to ensure that when I walked away, she would feel the weight of her choices as heavily as I had felt them. This wasn't about justice. It was about survival. Hers. Mean it. And the fragile pieces of my dignity that I refused to let her shatter again. The first step was to isolate her. Emily thrived on the attention of others, and I knew she would crumble if that was taken away. I stopped going to social events with her, subtly redirecting our mutual friend's attention to her increasingly erratic behavior. I planted seeds of doubt, casually mentioning her late nights and stress at work in conversations. It wasn't long before the whispers started. At home, I played the role of the clueless husband. I smiled, nodded, and pretended everything was fine while meticulously preparing for the day I would expose her. Every time she left the house, I checked her belongings, her purse, her car, her second phone. Every little detail became another piece of ammunition. Our finances were intertwined, but I had always kept a separate account, just in case. Now it became my lifeline. Over the course of a month, I systematically drained our joint account, transferring funds into my private savings. Emily didn't notice at first. She never paid attention to the bank statements. But I made sure to leave just enough for her to think everything was normal. I also began liquidating small assets, stocks, bonds, anything that could be converted to cash. I wasn't just preparing for a divorce. I was ensuring that when it was over, she would be left with nothing but the fallout of her decisions. The company gala was the perfect stage. It was Emily's favorite event of the year, a glittering celebration of success and networking opportunities. She spent weeks preparing, selecting the perfect dress, and rehearsing her charming small talk. She had no idea that I had been planning my own performance. The night of the gala, I arrived separately, claiming work obligations. I walked in just as Emily was basking in the attention of a small crowd. She looked radiant, the picture of confidence, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. At the height of the evening, I stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady but cold. "I'd like to share a personal story, one of love, betrayal, and the consequences of deceit." What followed was a carefully crafted speech, peppered with enough subtle details to make my point without outright naming her. But the final blow came when I played a video on the projector, one of the recordings I had found on her laptop. The room fell silent as her affair played out in front of our friends and colleagues. Gasps echoed through the hall. Emily's face turned ghostly white. Emily fled the room before the video finished. I didn't follow. I stayed to answer the inevitable questions, deflecting pity and steering the narrative in my favor. By the time I left, the damage was done. Emily's reputation was in tatters, and our marriage was effectively over. When I returned home, I found her sitting in the dark, her makeup smeared from tears. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. Instead, I handed her the divorce papers I had prepared weeks earlier. "Sign these," I said, my tone devoid of emotion, "and get out of my house." The next day, Emily called me repeatedly, leaving tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness. She swore she had made a mistake, that she still loved me, that she could change. But I had heard it all before. Her words rang hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage the life she had so carelessly destroyed. When she showed up at my office unannounced, I finally confronted her. You didn't just betray me, I said, my voice heavy with anger. You destroyed the trust that held us together. There's no coming back from that. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Armed with the evidence I had collected, I ensured that Emily walked away with the bare minimum. The house, the car, the savings, it was all mine. She fought, of course, but the courts sided with me. Infidelity has a way of tipping the scales. As I watched her pack her belongings and leave, I felt a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. Revenge had been satisfying in the moment, but now I was left with the quiet aftermath. The silence of a house that no longer felt like home. The echoes of a love that had turned to ash. It's been months since Emily left, and I'm still piecing my life back together. Some days are easier than others. I've reconnected with old friends, thrown myself into work, and started exploring hobbies I'd long neglected. But every now and then, I catch myself looking at the empty side of the bed and wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Maybe there was. Or maybe some people are simply destined to betray the ones who love them most. The days that followed were quieter than I anticipated. The storm I had unleashed had calmed, leaving behind the unsettling silence of an empty house and a hollow heart. Emily was gone, and with her, the life I had once envisioned. My evenings were no longer filled with her laughter, genuine or otherwise, but with the quiet hum of the television and the faint creak of settling wood. At first, the solitude was a relief, a much-needed break from the constant tension and distrust. But soon, it became a mirror, reflecting the emptiness that had been growing inside me long before Emily's betrayals. I had won the war, but the cost felt immeasurable. Her things were still there, scattered like relics of a life that no longer existed. The scent of her perfume lingered in the bedroom. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter. I couldn't bring myself to touch them, as if doing so would acknowledge her absence in a way I wasn't ready to face. One evening, I found myself staring at a framed photo of us from our honeymoon. We looked so happy, so naive. I tried to remember the man I had been in that photo, the man who had believed in forever. But he felt like a stranger now, someone I had left behind in the wreckage of our marriage. People often ask why I stayed after the first betrayal, and honestly, I've asked myself the same question countless times. Was it love? Fear? Greed? Maybe it was all three. I had wanted to believe that we could rise above it, that the love we shared was strong enough to withstand even the deepest wounds. But love isn't always enough. It can't erase the scars or silence the doubts. And it certainly can't turn back time. As much as I had loved Emily, her choices had revealed a side of her I couldn't unsee, a side that cared more about her desires than the promises we had made to each other. I started therapy a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. At first, it felt like admitting defeat, but over time, I began to see it as a way to reclaim my life. My therapist, a calm and patient woman named Karen, helped me unravel the tangled mess of emotions I had been carrying. She didn't judge me for my anger or my revenge. Instead, she encouraged me to explore the pain beneath it. "What do you want from life now?" she asked me one day, her pen poised over her notepad. I didn't have an answer. For so long, my life had been defined by my marriage and my career. Without Emily, without the future we had planned, I felt untethered. Free, yes, but also adrift. One evening, as I was sorting through old emails, I found one from Emily. It was short, almost curt, and entirely unexpected. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'd like to talk. There are things I need to say. Please consider meeting me." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to delete it, to erase her from my life completely. But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, wanted closure. Against my better judgment, I replied. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Emily was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands clasped around a steaming mug. She looked different, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft and unsure. I didn't respond. Instead, I waited, giving her the space to say whatever it was she needed to say. "I know I hurt you," she began, her eyes welling with tears. "And I know there's nothing I can say to make it right. But I want you to know, I'm sorry. Truly." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of all that had been left unsaid. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love I had once felt for her, buried beneath layers of pain and anger. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her betrayals. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, my voice steady but cold. "And honestly, I don't think you deserve it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just needed you to hear it." We left the cafe without saying much else. She looked back as she walked away, her eyes pleading for something I couldn't give her. I stood there for a moment, watching her fade into the distance, and felt an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The meeting with Emily marked a turning point for me. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me the closure I hadn't realized I needed. I began focusing on myself, on rebuilding my life one small step at a time. I reconnected with old friends, took up running, and even signed up for a photography class. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Looking back, I've realized that Emily's betrayal taught me more than I ever could have learned from a perfect marriage. It taught me the importance of trust, of communication, and of valuing myself enough to walk away from something that was destroying me. It's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself thinking less about Emily and more about my own future. The therapy sessions continued, and each one peeled back another layer of resentment, regret, and guilt. Karen pushed me to confront the hardest truths, that I had stayed too long, that I had allowed myself to be diminished by someone who was supposed to lift me up. "Why did you stay?" she asked one day, her gaze piercing but kind. "Because I loved her," I replied, the words tasting bitter now. "Because I thought that love meant enduring anything." "And what does it mean to you now?" she asked. The answer came slowly, like a seed pushing through hardened soil. "It means valuing myself enough to let go." During this time, I reconnected with an old friend, Marcus. We had worked together years ago, and though we had drifted apart, he reached out after hearing about the divorce. Over beers one evening, I found myself unloading the entire story. The betrayals, the revenge, the aftermath. "You did what you had to do," Marcus said, nodding. "But now it's time to stop looking back. You've got the rest of your life ahead of you." It was simple advice, but it hit me with surprising force. For so long, my focus had been on Emily, her actions, her choices, her impact on my life. It was time to turn the lens inward. Inspired by that conversation, I began actively seeking out joy. I joined a running club, signed up for a cooking class, and even adopted a dog from a local shelter. His name was Max, a scruffy mutt with boundless energy and a knack for making me laugh. Max became my constant companion, his wagging tail a daily reminder that life could still be good. One day, while on a hike with Max, I reached the summit of a small hill and looked out over the sprawling landscape. The view was breathtaking, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a deep, unshakable peace. It wasn't just the scenery. It was the realization that I was free. Free from Emily, free from the past, free to build a life on my own terms. Emily reached out again a few months later, this time through a handwritten letter. The sight of her familiar script brought a pang of nostalgia, but the contents of the letter left me unmoved. She apologized again, admitted to her flaws, and asked for another chance. Not to reconcile, but to have me in her life in some way. I thought about it for days, weighing the possibility of forgiveness against the scars she had left. In the end, I chose not to respond. Some doors are better left closed. Life continued to unfold in ways I never expected. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but with an open mind. I wasn't searching for love. I was searching for connection, for moments that reminded me of what it felt like to share my life with someone without fear or doubt. In time, I met someone. Her name was Claire, and she was everything Emily wasn't. Genuine, grounded, and kind. She knew about my past and accepted me for who I was, scars and all. With Claire, there was no pretense, no hidden agendas. Just the quiet comfort of being seen and valued for who I was. As Claire and I grew closer, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't thought possible. She encouraged me to pursue passions I had long abandoned. writing, painting, even traveling. Together, we explored new places, tried new things, and built a life that felt vibrant and full of possibility. Max adored her, of course, and the three of us quickly became a little family. It was simple, unassuming, and exactly what I needed. Looking back on everything, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the revenge, I realized that my journey wasn't just about surviving Emily's actions. It was about discovering my own strength, my own worth. It was about learning that even in the face of devastation, life goes on, and it can be beautiful again. I'll never forget what happened. The scars are still there, a reminder of the pain I endured. But they're also a testament to my resilience, to my ability to rebuild even when the foundation was gone. One day while walking Max in the park, I saw her. Emily. She was sitting on a bench, staring off into the distance. She looked older, wearier, as if the years had been unkind. For a moment, I debated whether to approach her, but something inside me held me back. Instead, I walked past, Max trotting happily beside me. She didn't notice me, and I didn't look back. It wasn't avoidance, it was freedom. For the first time, I felt no anger, no pain, just a quiet acceptance of the path I had taken and the life I had built since. In the years that followed, I often thought about the journey I had been on, not with regret, but with gratitude. It had been painful, yes, but it had also shaped me into the person I had become. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I learned to forgive, not for Emily's sake, but for my own. Forgiveness wasn't about absolving her of what she had done. It was about releasing myself from the grip of the past. Today, my life is full of quiet joys. Mornings with Claire and Max, evenings spent painting or reading, weekends exploring new places. It's not the life I once imagined, but it's a life I'm proud of, a life I've built from the ashes of what was. I still carry the scars of betrayal, but they no longer define me. Instead, they remind me of how far I've come, of the strength I found within myself when everything else fell apart. And for that, I am grateful. As time passed, the milestones of my new life began to take on more meaning. Claire and I moved in together, and her steady presence became the grounding force I hadn't realized I needed. Max had settled into our lives as if he'd always been part of it, and every day felt like a small celebration of the stability I had worked so hard to regain. I often thought about what it meant to come full circle. Betrayal had once been the axis around which my life turned, but now it was just a distant echo, a lesson rather than a defining feature. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could live in a way that honored the growth it forced upon me. One rainy evening, while Claire worked late, I sat at my desk with a blank sheet of paper in front of me. Something about the quiet urged me to write, not to anyone else, but to myself, the version of me who had endured those darkest moments. To the man I once was. I began, unsure where the words would lead. I wrote about the pain, the anger, and the moments I thought I wouldn't make it through. But I also wrote about the resilience, the strength, and the life that had emerged from the ruins. It wasn't just a letter. It was a reckoning, a way to acknowledge and honor the journey I had traveled. When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of a drawer. I didn't need to read it again. I had already lived it. I had taken up painting as a way to channel my emotions. But one canvas had remained unfinished for months. It was a stormy seascape, dark and chaotic, a reflection of the turmoil I had felt when I first started it. Every time I looked at it, I felt a pang of unease, as if it was a reminder of something I hadn't fully let go of. One Saturday, as the sun streamed through the windows, I pulled the canvas out and set it on the easel. With deliberate strokes, I began to soften the scene, adding light to the horizon, calming the waves. By the time I finished, the storm had passed, replaced by a tranquil, golden sunrise. It felt like a metaphor for my own transformation, a way to close the chapter once and for all. About a year after I saw Emily in the park, I ran into her again, this time at a bookstore. She was browsing the self-help section, her face lined with the kind of weariness that comes from carrying too many regrets. She spotted me before I could leave and hesitated, as if deciding whether to approach. "Hi," she said softly, offering a tentative smile. Hi, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We exchanged pleasantries. How are you? What are you up to? But it was clear there was more she wanted to say. Finally, she took a deep breath. I've been in therapy, she said. And I realized a lot about myself, about how much I hurt you. I just wanted you to know that. I nodded, unsure what to say. Her words felt genuine, but they didn't stir anything in me. I had already moved on, and while her apology was appreciated, it wasn't necessary for my healing. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, and left it at that. Claire and I stood on the edge of a cliff, the ocean stretching out before us, infinite and full of possibility. We had traveled to this spot on a whim, following an impulse to escape the routine and experience something new together. As the wind whipped through our hair, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't known in years. This was what life was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but full of meaning and connection. I took Claire's hand and squeezed it gently. Thank you, I said, my voice almost lost in the wind. For what? She asked, smiling up at me. For showing me what love is supposed to be. Betrayal is a wound, one that cuts deep and leaves scars. But it's also a teacher, revealing truths about ourselves and the people we choose to trust. It forces us to confront our vulnerabilities, to question our values, and ultimately to grow. For a long time, I thought Emily's betrayal had broken me. But now I see it for what it was, a painful but necessary catalyst for change. It taught me to value myself, to set boundaries, and to recognize the kind of love that builds rather than destroys. As I look back on everything, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the resilience it brought out in me. I'm grateful for the friends who supported me, the therapist who guided me, and the woman who helped me rediscover joy. Most of all, I'm grateful for the chance to start over, to build a life that feels true to who I am. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't one I would have chosen. But it was mine, and it led me here, to a place of peace, love, and unshakable strength. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about the path that had brought me here. It was hard to believe how much had changed in just a few years. Emily was no longer a specter in my mind, and the bitterness I once felt had faded into a dull memory. I had learned to live in the present, but the past still offered lessons. Each misstep, each heartbreak had contributed to the person I had become. I didn't resent those experiences anymore. I honored them as part of my growth. For the first time, I felt that I had truly closed the book on that chapter of my life. Claire often teased me about how guarded I had been when we first met. You had a fortress around you, she said one day, her laughter soft and teasing. She wasn't wrong. Opening up to someone new after Emily had felt like standing in the eye of a storm, vulnerable and exposed. But Claire had been patient. She didn't push. She simply waited, creating a space where I felt safe enough to let my walls down. And with each story I shared, each fear I admitted, the fortress crumbled a little more. Vulnerability wasn't easy, but it was worth it. It allowed love to grow, this time rooted in honesty and mutual respect. Claire and I celebrated our first anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. She had insisted on cooking, and though the food was slightly overcooked, I couldn't have cared less. The warmth of her smile, the easy rhythm of our conversation, it was everything I had once thought I'd never find again. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace with Max curled up at our feet. Claire reached for my hand, her eyes searching mine. "Do you ever regret giving love another chance?" she asked. "Not for a second," I replied, meaning every word. Months later, I received an unexpected visit. It was a rainy afternoon, and the sound of the doorbell startled me. When I opened the door, I found Emily standing there, drenched and shivering. She looked hesitant, almost afraid. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside, my mind racing. What could she possibly want after all this time? She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't want to disrupt your life," she began, "but I needed to see you, to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, my confusion evident. "For forcing me to face myself, she said. I've spent years in therapy, trying to understand who I am and why I made the choices I did. You didn't just walk away. You made me confront the damage I caused. And I needed to tell you that it changed me. Her words were sincere, but they didn't stir the emotions I expected. There was no anger, no sadness, only a quiet sense of finality. I'm glad you found what you needed, I said, my tone even. But that part of my life is behind me now. She nodded, her expression a mix of acceptance and lingering regret. I hope you're happy, she said before leaving. Emily's visit stayed with me for days, not because it reopened old wounds, but because it solidified my healing. Forgiveness had always seemed like an unattainable ideal, something reserved for saints and martyrs. But now I realized it wasn't about excusing her actions. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. In forgiving Emily, I wasn't letting her off the hook. I was reclaiming my peace, severing the last thread that tied me to the pain of the past. It was a quiet, personal victory, one that no one else needed to witness or validate. With the past finally at rest, I turned my attention to the future. For years, my work had been my identity, a refuge from the chaos of my personal life. But now, I wanted more. I began volunteering at a local shelter, teaching life skills to people trying to rebuild their lives. Helping others find their footing reminded me of my own journey, of the resilience it had taken to start over. It wasn't just fulfilling, it was transformative. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond myself. On a crisp autumn morning, Claire and I took a walk through the park where we had shared our first date. The leaves crunched beneath our feet, and Max bounded ahead, his tail wagging furiously. As we reached a quiet clearing, I stopped and turned to her. I've been thinking about this for a while, I said, pulling a small velvet box from my pocket. You show me what love can be, what it should be. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you the same. Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded, her smile radiant. Yes, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family gathered under a canopy of trees. As I stood at the altar, watching Claire walk toward me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a second chance at love. It was a testament to the strength it takes to rebuild, to trust, to open your heart again. When we exchanged vows, I didn't just promise to love her. I promised to honor the journey that had brought us together, to cherish the lessons I had learned, and to embrace the future with hope and courage. Life has a way of surprising you, of taking you places you never thought you'd go. For me, it took betrayal to teach me the value of trust, loss to show me the power of resilience, and heartbreak to lead me to a love that feels true and lasting. As Claire and I build our life together, I no longer dwell on what was lost. Instead, I celebrate what was gained, the wisdom, the strength, and the unshakable belief that even in the face of the deepest pain, it's possible to find joy again. This is my story, but it's also a reminder. No matter how broken you feel, healing is always within reach. Part 52, A New Legacy. As time passed, Claire and I found ourselves dreaming of a future filled with possibilities. She wanted to travel, to see places that had only existed in her imagination. I wanted to build something lasting, a legacy that reflected the strength and love we had found together. One evening, while discussing plans over dinner, an idea struck us. What if we created a foundation, not just for us, but for people like the man I once was, broken, lost, and searching for hope? Claire's eyes lit up at the thought, and within weeks, we had begun laying the groundwork for a nonprofit focused on rebuilding lives after personal devastation. The foundation became a labor of love. We called it Second Chances, a name that resonated deeply with both of us. Its mission was simple: to provide resources, counseling, and community support for those recovering from betrayal, divorce, or other life-altering events. At first, it was small, a handful of volunteers working out of a borrowed office space. But as word spread, so did our reach. Donations poured in, and before long, Second Chances was hosting workshops, offering therapy sessions, and even partnering with local shelters to expand its impact. Watching it grow felt like healing on a grand scale, as if every life we touched was a part of my own redemption. One of the most unexpected joys of this new chapter was reconnecting with my estranged niece, Lisa. She was in her early 20s, navigating the complexities of adulthood and looking for guidance. Our relationship blossomed into something I hadn't realized I needed, a chance to be a mentor, a guide, and, in some ways, the father figure she had lost. Lisa became involved in the foundation, bringing her energy and fresh perspective to our projects. Her presence reminded me of the importance of family, even the ones you build rather than inherit. She often joked that Max was the true head of the family, and seeing her laugh so easily made me feel whole in ways I hadn't expected. Though life had found a new rhythm, there were still moments of quiet reflection, times when I'd revisit the scars left by Emily's betrayal. It wasn't longing or regret, but a curious wondering about how differently things might have turned out. One evening, as I sifted through old photos, I stumbled upon one of us at the beach. We were laughing, our arms wrapped around each other, blissfully unaware of the storm ahead. Instead of sadness, I felt a quiet gratitude for the good times we had shared, even if they were fleeting. It reminded me that life is a tapestry, woven with both joy and pain, and every thread has its place. Claire surprised me one morning with news that left me speechless. She had been working on a book, a memoir of sorts about love, loss, and rebuilding. She called it After the Storm, and it was as much about her journey as it was about ours. Reading the first draft brought me to tears. Her words were raw, honest, and filled with hope. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. When the book was published, it became an instant hit, inspiring countless readers to embrace their own second chances. As the years rolled by, Claire and I found ourselves embracing the small, quiet moments that made life beautiful. Morning coffee on the porch, walks in the park with Max, lazy Sundays spent cooking and laughing together. It wasn't the grand gestures or big milestones that defined our happiness. It was the day-to-day rhythm of a life built on trust and love. We traveled to places I had only dreamed of: Italy, Japan, New Zealand, and each journey brought us closer. Standing on the shores of Lake Como or gazing at the cherry blossoms in Kyoto, I often marveled at how far I had come. From the ashes of betrayal, I had built a life that felt richer, deeper, and more meaningful than I could have imagined. One quiet afternoon, I received a call that took me by surprise. It was Emily. She sounded hesitant, almost fragile, as she explained the reason for reaching out. "I just wanted to let you know, I'm getting remarried," she said. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The news stirred a mix of emotions: relief, curiosity, and a faint trace of sadness for what might have been. But mostly, I felt at peace. "Congratulations," I said finally, my tone warm but detached. "I hope you find the happiness you're looking for." She thanked me, her voice tinged with what I could only describe as closure. It was the last time we spoke, and I knew it was for the best. In our twilight years, Claire and I took comfort in the legacy we had built together. Second chances had grown beyond our wildest dreams, helping thousands of people reclaim their lives. Lisa had taken on a leadership role, bringing fresh energy and vision to the foundation, and we knew it was in good hands. Our story had become a source of inspiration for others, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love. It wasn't the life I had imagined all those years ago, but it was more than I could have hoped for. As I sit here now, penning the final words of my story, I am filled with a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the betrayals or the pain, but for the lessons they taught me and the life they led me to. Betrayal may have broken me, but it also forged me into someone stronger, someone who found love and purpose in the most unexpected places. Life is messy, unpredictable, and often unfair. But it is also beautiful, filled with moments of joy, connection, and meaning. And as I look back on everything, I can say with certainty, I wouldn't change a thing. Because in the end, it all brought me here. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss interesting life stories, and write a comment if you like the story. See you.